My name is Michael, and I am 32 years old. Woodworking has been my passion since I was 14, carefully building my workshop in my parents' garage over 10 years. I poured my heart, soul, and $30,000 into that space. Then one day, my dad casually gave it all to my sister Lisa and her boyfriend Troy, dismissing my decade of dedication as just a hobby. The real kicker: 2 months later, Dad showed up at my new workshop practically begging me to save Troy's failing furniture business that he started with my stolen equipment. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. And if you have ever had your passion dismissed by family, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of storytellers. I still remember the first time I held a piece of oak in my hands. I was 14 years old, standing in my grandfather's workshop behind his house in rural Pennsylvania. The wood felt alive, somehow warm, and full of potential. My grandfather Robert was a master craftsman who built everything from rocking chairs to grandfather clocks. He placed his worn hand over mine and guided me through my first cut with a handsaw. The wood will tell you what it wants to be. Michael, he told me, with the kind of certainty that only comes from decades of experience. Your job is to listen. That summer, I spent every day in his workshop, learning how to use basic tools, understanding different types of wood, and developing a feel for the craft. By the end of August, I had created my first project, a simple pine box with dovetail joints. It was far from perfect. The joints were slightly uneven, and I had sanded one edge more than the others. But when I presented it to my mother as a jewelry box, the pride I felt was indescribable. After my grandfather passed away when I was 16, I inherited some of his tools. A beautiful set of chisels, his favorite hand plane, and a few other essentials. These became my most treasured possessions. I set up a small workbench in the corner of our garage, much to my father's annoyance. He never understood why I would spend hours shaping wood when I could be playing video games or hanging out with friends like a normal teenager. This better not be permanent, he grumbled, when I installed my first pegboard for tools. Cars belong in garages, not hobby stations. But my mother, seeing how much joy woodworking brought me, convinced him to let me use the space. I promised to keep it clean and only work during reasonable hours. Every birthday and Christmas, I asked for tools instead of the latest electronics or fashion. My collection grew slowly but steadily. A quality miter saw from my 18th birthday, a drill press I bought with money. From my first job at 19, a small lathe at 21. Throughout college, where I studied business administration, woodworking remained my escape. While other students relieved stress with parties, I found peace in the rhythmic motion of sanding, the precise calculations required for a perfect fit, and the satisfaction of bringing a design from my sketchbook into reality. My dorm room was always full of small wooden items, picture frames, for friends, desk organizers, and small decorative pieces. By the time I graduated, I had developed considerable skill. What had started as crude attempts had evolved into finely crafted pieces. I was particularly proud of a walnut writing desk I made for my final project in a community woodworking class I took on weekends. The instructor, a furniture maker with 30 years of experience, suggested I consider woodworking as more than just a hobby. "You have a gift, Michael," he said, running his hand along the smooth curve of the desk's edge. "This level of attention to detail and intuition for design cannot be taught." But my father had different ideas. When I moved back home after college, taking an entry-level marketing job at a local firm, he expected woodworking to take a back seat to my real career. What he did not understand was that the hours I spent in the garage, after work and on weekends, were not just relaxation or a distraction. They were the moments I felt most alive, most myself. The scent of freshly cut cherry, the fine dust that settled on my arms, the profound satisfaction of completing a joint so tight, it barely needed glue. These were the things that made my soul sing. Woodworking was never just a hobby to me. It was a calling, a form of expression, and increasingly, I began to see it as a potential future. Each piece I completed was better than the last. Each technique I mastered opened doors to new possibilities. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a dream began to take shape. My own custom furniture business, creating heirloom-quality pieces that would last for generations. The transformation of my parents' two-car garage into a functional workshop was a gradual process that took place over nearly a decade. When I was 22, fresh out of college, and working my first corporate job, I approached my parents with a proposal. I would pay a monthly rent for the garage space, maintain the exterior of the house, including lawn care and snow removal, and help with utilities in exchange for converting the garage into a proper workshop. My mother was supportive, immediately seeing how serious I was about my craft. My father, however, took more convincing. "Where will we park the cars?" he asked, arms crossed over his chest. "The driveway is wide enough for both your vehicles," I pointed out, "and I will build a small covered area to protect them from the worst of the weather." After 2 weeks of negotiations and a detailed written agreement that specified I would return the garage to its original condition if I moved out, he reluctantly agreed. Looking back, I think he assumed my enthusiasm for woodworking would fade as adult responsibilities mounted. He could not have been more wrong. The first major upgrade was proper insulation and climate control. Woodworking requires relatively stable temperature and humidity levels, especially for glue-ups and finishing. I spent 3 weekends installing insulation in the walls and ceiling, then added a mini split system that could heat and cool the space efficiently. The electrical system needed a complete overhaul to handle the power requirements of my growing tool collection. I hired a licensed electrician, but worked alongside him to learn and save on labor costs. Next came the dust collection system. Wood dust is not just messy, it is a health hazard and a fire risk. I invested in a 2-horsepower dust collector with ductwork connecting to all my major tools. The system was expensive, nearly $4,000, including all the piping and fittings, but essential for safety and cleanliness. Proper lighting transformed the space. I installed 8 LED shop lights across the ceiling, eliminating shadows and making detailed work possible at any time of day or night. The concrete floor got an epoxy coating that made cleanup easier and brightened the space further. The heart of any workshop is the workbench, and mine was a labor of love. I spent 6 months building a massive workbench from hard maple, with a top 3 inches thick. It featured precision dog holes for clamping an integrated tail vise and storage drawers underneath for hand tools. That bench alone cost me nearly $2,000 in materials, not counting the hundreds of hours of labor. Tool acquisition was the most significant investment. Quality woodworking tools are expensive, and I built my collection methodically, prioritizing versatility and quality over quantity. My table saw cabinet model with a cast iron top cost $3,500. The bandsaw was another $2,000. The planer jointer router table drill press and lathe added another $8,000 to the total. Hand tools, including premium chisels, planes, and measuring instruments, accounted for at least $5,000 more over the years. Then there were the specialized tools, the domino joiner for precise strong joints, the track saw for breaking down large sheets of plywood, the biscuit joiner, the scroll saw, the spindle sander. Each one represented hours of research, saving, and justification to myself that the investment would pay off in capabilities and quality of work. Wood storage became crucial as my projects grew more ambitious. I built a lumber rack along one wall that could hold hundreds of board feet of hardwood. I learned to buy rough lumber directly from sawmills, which was more economical but required proper drying and processing. A small room in the corner became a finishing area, sealed off from the dust with plastic sheeting and equipped with proper ventilation for applying lacquers and other finishes. By the time I was 30, the garage had become a professional-grade workshop that rivaled many commercial spaces. All told, I had invested over $30,000 of my own money into the equipment, infrastructure, and materials. That figure does not include the countless hours of labor research and skill development. The space became more than just a place to build things. It was my sanctuary, a place where the stresses of my day job fell away. After particularly difficult days at the marketing firm, I would spend evenings in the workshop, sometimes just sweeping the floor or organizing tools to clear my mind. On weekends, I would lose myself for hours in projects, emerging only when my mother knocked on the door to remind me to eat. As my skills developed, friends and family began requesting pieces: a coffee table for my cousin's new apartment, a set of cutting boards as wedding gifts, a crib for my best friend's first child. I charged only for materials at first, happy to have my work appreciated and to practice different techniques. Then came my first commission from someone outside my immediate circle, a referral from a coworker who had seen the desk I made for my home office. The client wanted a custom entertainment center in Cherry, with specific dimensions and features to house their audio-visual equipment. I quoted a price that seemed fair for the materials, and estimated time about $2,500. When they accepted without hesitation, I realized I had likely undercharged by at least $1,000 based on the market rate for such custom work. That project marked a turning point. I began to see that my hobby had potential as a viable business. I created a simple website showing my work and started an Instagram account documenting my projects. Small commissions trickled, in which I fulfilled on evenings and weekends. By my 31st birthday, I was making nearly as much from my side hustle as from my full-time marketing job, though I was working essentially 2 full-time positions to do so. My workshop had evolved from a corner of the garage to a comprehensive space where I could create almost anything a client might want. Every tool, every improvement represented not just money spent, but a deepening commitment to my craft and my future. It was not just a collection of equipment. It was the physical manifestation of 10 years of passion, learning, and dedication. My younger sister Lisa and I had always had a complicated relationship. 4 years my junior, she grew up as the darling of the family, particularly in my father's eyes. While I was expected to maintain perfect grades, hold down part-time jobs from 16 onwards, and have a clear plan for my future, Lisa seemed to float through life on charm and my father's indulgence. This is not to say Lisa was not talented or intelligent. She was both, with a natural aptitude for art and social situations that made people gravitate toward her. But where I faced consequences for missteps, Lisa received second chances and assistance. When I needed a car for college, I worked 2 jobs to save up for a used Honda. When Lisa needed one, Dad surprised her with a nearly new Volkswagen for her 18th birthday. These disparities were never acknowledged openly, but they created an undercurrent of tension that followed us into adulthood. By the time Lisa was 28, she had cycled through 3 different college majors without completing any of them, held numerous jobs in retail and hospitality, and lived in our parents' house intermittently between apartments. She could not quite afford on her own. Dad always justified his financial support by saying, "She just has not found her path yet," while implying that my more conventional choices had made my life easier. Then Troy entered the picture. Lisa met him at an art gallery opening, where she was working as a server for the catering company. Troy Anderson was 33 tall and conventionally handsome, with the kind of confidence that can either signal genuine capability or mask its complete absence. He described himself as a serial entrepreneur, and visionary terms I had learned to be wary of in my years in marketing. "You should meet Lisa's new boyfriend," my mother told me over the phone. "Your father is quite impressed with him. He has so many interesting business ideas." I reserved judgment until the following Sunday dinner, where Troy dominated the conversation with tales of his previous ventures. A cold brew coffee subscription service that was poised to revolutionize the market before his partner failed. To execute the vision, a pop-up retail concept that was ahead of its time. A social media app that was just like Instagram, but I thought of it 6 months earlier and would have been huge if he had found the right developers. What was notably absent from these stories was any mention of actual success or profit. Each venture had apparently been brilliant, but failed due to circumstances beyond Troy's control or because of others' shortcomings. Throughout dinner, my father nodded appreciatively at Troy's stories, while Lisa gazed at him adoringly. I caught my mother's eye once or twice, seeing a flicker of the same skepticism I felt, but she remained politely engaged. After dinner, Troy cornered me in the kitchen as I was helping with dishes. "So Michael, Lisa tells me you are into carpentry," he said, leaning against the counter in a way that blocked my access to the dishwasher. "Woodworking," I corrected. "Furniture design and creation mostly." Right, he nodded, as if the distinction was trivial. "I have actually been thinking about getting into the furniture space. There is a huge market for boutique pieces with the right branding and social media presence. The margins can be incredible." I dried my hands slowly. It is a craft that takes years to develop. The margins are good on high-end pieces, but those require significant skill and specialized equipment. Troy waved this away. The actual construction is just execution. The real value is in the concept and marketing. With the right presentation, you can command premium prices. Besides, you can always hire people for the technical parts. That is not how custom furniture businesses typically work. I began, but Troy had already moved on, pulling out his phone to show me sleek, minimalist furniture from Instagram accounts with hundreds of thousands of followers. This is the aesthetic I am thinking of. Clean lines, natural materials, but with a modern edge. I already have some designs sketched out. I scrolled through the images, recognizing pieces that would require master-level joinery, specialized tools, and years of experience to execute properly. These are incredible pieces, but they represent thousands of hours of practice and technique development. The people making these have typically been woodworking for decades. Troy's smile tightened slightly. Well, how hard can it really be? I mean, no offense, but if it is your hobby, I am sure I can pick up the basics pretty quickly. I have always been good with my hands. Before I could respond, Lisa entered the kitchen, slipping her arm around Troy's waist. Are you two talking about Troy's furniture company idea? Is it not amazing? It is certainly ambitious, I said carefully. Troy has such a good eye for design, Lisa continued, and he already has connections with some interior designers who are interested in carrying his pieces. Without prototypes, I asked. They have seen my concept drawings, Troy said, with the confidence of someone who believed sketches and finished products were separated by mere technicalities rather than hundreds of hours of skilled labor. The conversation shifted as my parents joined us, but that night planted the first seed of concern. Troy spoke about fine woodworking with the casual disregard of someone who had never faced the humbling experience of trying to execute precision joinery or the patient process of bringing out the natural beauty in a piece of figured maple. Over the next few weeks, Troy became a fixture at family gatherings. Each time his furniture business idea grew more elaborate now, including plans for a full production line and international distribution. Yet, when I asked specific questions about wood movement joinery methods or finishing techniques, he would redirect the conversation to marketing strategies and potential price points. What troubled me most was how my father had become Troy's biggest supporter. Dad, who had dismissed my woodworking as a diversion from my real career for years now, spoke enthusiastically about the tremendous potential of Troy's furniture concept. He began offering business advice connections to potential investors and even mentioned the possibility of providing some startup capital. It is like Dad has completely forgotten that I have been building furniture for years, I complained to my friend Brian over beers one evening. He has literally seen me create dozens of pieces, and now he is acting like Troy's idea to disrupt the furniture industry is the most brilliant thing he has ever heard. Have you shown your dad your website or your commission waitlist? Brian asked. I have tried. He just says, it is great that my hobby can make a little extra money, but that it is not a scalable business model like what Troy is proposing. I did not yet know it, but this was just the beginning of a painful lesson in family dynamics and recognition that would fundamentally change my relationship with my parents, my sister, and my craft. The day everything changed started normally enough. It was a Saturday in early May, and I had planned to spend the weekend working on a walnut dining table commissioned by a repeat client. I arrived at my parents' house around 9 in the morning, travel mug of coffee in hand, and mind already focused on the mortise and tenon joints I needed to cut for the table base. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar truck backed up to the garage door. For a moment, I thought my parents might be having something delivered, but as I got closer, I realized with growing alarm that the truck was being loaded, not unloaded. Two men I did not recognize were carefully maneuvering my jointer, one of the largest and most expensive machines in my workshop, up a ramp and into the truck bed. I parked hastily and jumped out of my car. Hey, what are you doing with that? I called out, jogging toward them. One of the men looked over. We are moving equipment for Mr. Anderson. Are you Michael? Yes, I am Michael, and that is my jointer. Where are you taking it? We have got a list of items to transport to the new workshop location, the man said, pulling a paper from his pocket. Your father said you were aware of the move. My stomach dropped. I pushed past them into the garage and froze in the doorway. My workshop, The space I had meticulously built over a decade was in disarray. Several of my larger tools had already been disconnected from the dust collection system. My carefully organized hand tool wall was half empty, expensive chisels and planes haphazardly packed into plastic totes. The lumber rack had been partially cleared with some of my carefully dried and stored hardwood boards stacked carelessly on the floor. In the midst of this chaos stood my father, Troy, and Lisa. They looked up in surprise as I entered. Michael, my father, set his tone, suggesting I was the one out of place. "We did not expect you today." "I work here every weekend," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "What is going on? Why are these men taking my equipment?" Troy stepped forward with the confident smile that I had come to find increasingly irritating. "Your dad has generously offered to let us use the workshop for my furniture business startup. We are just relocating some of the equipment to optimize the workflow." Relocating my equipment. Without asking me, "Where exactly are you taking it?" "We have leased a small commercial space about 20 minutes from here," Lisa explained. "It will be perfect for Troy's production needs, but we needed some essential equipment to get started." I turned to my father, disbelief and betrayal washing over me. "Dad, this is my workshop. These are my tools that I paid for. You cannot just give them away." My father's expression hardened in the way it always did when he felt his authority was being questioned. "Now, Michael, let us be reasonable. This garage is part of our house, and the agreement was always temporary. Troy and Lisa have a real business opportunity here, not just a hobby." The word hobby hit me like a physical blow. A decade of dedication, thousands of dollars, invested countless hours of learning and creating, all dismissed as a mere pastime. A hobby. I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I have paid you rent for this space for 10 years. I have built a client base. I have commissions booked 6 months out. How is that just a hobby?" "You have a good job in marketing," my father countered. "This woodworking has always been something you do on the side. Troy is planning to make this his full-time business. He needs proper equipment to get started." My equipment, I emphasized. Equipment that I researched, saved for, purchased, and maintained. The table saw alone cost me $3,500. The jointer they are loading right now was $4,000. All told, there is over $30,000 worth of tools in this workshop. Troy interjected, "We are not taking all of it. You can keep the smaller hand tools." The condescension in his tone pushed me over the edge. "How generous of you to let me keep my own property. You have no idea how to use half of these machines properly. That jointer will be dangerous in inexperienced hands." "I have watched plenty of YouTube tutorials," Troy said dismissively. "Woodworking is not rocket science." I turned back to my father, making one last attempt at reason. "Dad, please, this is not right. I built this workshop piece by piece. These are my tools paid for with my money. You cannot just give them away, because Troy has convinced you his business idea is better than my hobby." For a moment, I thought I saw uncertainty in my father's eyes, but then Lisa stepped forward, placing her hand on his arm. "Dad, you promised," she said softly. "You said you would help us get started. This is our chance to build something real." Something in her words or touch resolved whatever doubts my father might have had. He straightened his shoulders and spoke with finality. "Michael, Troy, and Lisa need this opportunity. Your sister has struggled to find her path, and now she has a chance at a real business with Troy. You have your career. You do not need these tools like they do. So that is it. You are just taking my property and giving it to them. Do I have any say in this at all?" "We will compensate you eventually," Troy offered, "once the business is up and running and profitable." The presumption that I would agree to this arrangement, that I would simply hand over the tools that represented years of sacrifice and dedication on a vague promise of future payment, was the final straw. "No," I said firmly. "This is theft. Plain and simple. I never agreed to loan or sell my equipment. I want those movers to unload my jointer right now, and I want everyone out of my workshop." My father's face darkened with anger. "This is my house, Michael. My garage. I decide what happens here, not you. And these are my tools," I countered. "I have receipts for everything. If those movers leave with any more of my equipment, I will report it as stolen." A tense silence fell over the garage. The movers, sensing the conflict, had stopped working and stood awkwardly by the truck. Lisa looked tearful, while Troy's confident demeanor had shifted to something harder and more calculating. My father broke the silence. "I think you should leave and cool down, Michael. We can discuss this when you are being more reasonable." "I am not leaving while people are loading my property into a truck," I insisted. "Either you leave now, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing," my father said, pulling out his phone to emphasize the threat. The shock of hearing my own father threaten to have me arrested left me momentarily speechless. I looked around the workshop that had been my sanctuary for so many years now, being dismantled without my consent. I looked at Lisa, who avoided my gaze, at Troy, who had the audacity to look annoyed by the delay, and finally at my father, whose expression showed no recognition of the depth of his betrayal. "Fine," I said finally, my voice hollow. "Take it all. But do not expect me to help when Troy inevitably fails, because he has no idea what he is doing. And do not expect our relationship to ever be the same." I walked out, the sound of my boots on the concrete floor echoing in the space that was no longer mine. In my car, hands shaking with anger and hurt, I called Brian. "They are taking my workshop," I said, when he answered, my voice breaking. "My dad is giving all my equipment to Lisa and Troy for their furniture business. He called my woodworking just a hobby." "What? He cannot do that," Brian replied, outrage clear in his voice. "Those are your tools. You paid for them." "Apparently he can. He threatened to call the police if I did not leave." "Come over," Brian said, without hesitation. "We will figure this out." As I drove away from my parents' house, I caught a glimpse in my rearview mirror of the movers returning to work, loading more of my carefully chosen, lovingly maintained equipment into the truck. In that moment, something fundamental broke in my relationship with my family, a fracture I was not sure could ever be fully repaired. The first 2 weeks after losing my workshop were a blur of anger, disbelief, and grief. I stayed in Brian's spare room, making calls to clients to explain the situation and ask for extensions on pending projects. Most were understanding, but I lost 2 commissions that had firm deadlines, further fueling my sense of injustice. "You should sue them," Brian suggested one evening as we sat on his porch nursing beers. "Small claims court at minimum. You have receipts, proof of ownership." I considered it, but the thought of facing my family in court, of having our private betrayal become public record, felt like another loss on top of everything else. Besides, legal action would take time and money I did not have to spare, especially now that I needed to rebuild from scratch. "I need to focus on moving forward," I said finally. "I cannot get stuck in this anger, or it will consume me." The first step was finding a new space. I spent days driving around looking at garage rentals, small commercial units, and even storage facilities that might be converted to workshops. Most were either too expensive, too small, or had restrictions that would make woodworking impossible. Then, through a stroke of luck, I found a listing for a small house on the edge of town with a detached 2-car garage. The house was modest, just 1 bedroom and a small living area, but the garage was almost the same size as my parents had been, with good ceiling height and a concrete floor. The monthly rent was stretching my budget, but it included utilities and had no restrictions on using the garage as a workshop. I signed a 1-year lease, the same day I viewed it. The next challenge was rebuilding my tool collection. I had managed to grab my grandfather's hand tools before leaving my parents' garage, along with a few smaller power tools that had been in my car for a recent on-site installation. Everything else, from my table saw to my dust collection system, was gone. "You need to prioritize," advised Jorge, a furniture maker I had met through a local woodworking guild. "What tools do you absolutely need to complete basic projects and start earning again?" I spent a weekend creating a spreadsheet listing tools by necessity, cost, and potential alternatives. A quality table saw was non-negotiable, as was a planer for dimensioning lumber. But maybe I could use a track saw instead of a miter saw for now. Perhaps I could join the local makerspace to use their jointer and bandsaw until I could afford my own again. To fund this rebuild, I made the difficult decision to take out a personal loan. With my good credit score, I qualified for $20,000 at a reasonable interest rate. It was less than the value of what I had lost, but enough to get the essential equipment and some basic inventory of hardwood. Within a month, I had set up a functional, if sparse, workshop. My new table saw was a hybrid model, less powerful than my previous cabinet saw, but still capable of accurate cuts. I found a used planer in good condition on Craigslist for half the retail price. A basic dust collector, a drill press, and a router completed my power tool essentials. The walls looked empty, without my extensive hand tool collection, but I had the basics needed to work. Throughout this rebuilding process, I had minimal contact with my family. My mother called several times, but our conversations were strained and brief. She tried to position herself as neutral, saying she understood my feelings, but also thought I should be supportive of Lisa's chance at success. My father did not call at all. Neither did Lisa. One unexpected positive outcome of this upheaval was the support I received from the local woodworking community. When word spread about what had happened, fellow craftspeople offered help in various forms. Jorge lent me his track saw indefinitely. An older woodworker who was downsizing sold me his collection of clamps at a fraction of their value. A furniture designer with a large shop offered to let me use her jointer and bandsaw whenever I needed until I could replace my own. "We take care of our own," she told me simply. This generosity strengthened my resolve to turn this setback into an opportunity. If my family could not see the value in my craft, I would prove it through success. I decided to take the leap I had been contemplating for years, transforming my hobby into a full-time business. I gave notice at my marketing job using my remaining 2 weeks to create a business plan for Michael's Custom Woodworks. My experience in marketing proved valuable, as I designed a professional website, showcasing my previous projects, created business cards, and developed a social media strategy focused on documenting my process and connecting with potential clients. The first month of full-time woodworking was terrifying. Without my marketing salary as a safety net, every expense was scrutinized. I took on any job that came my way, from furniture repairs to small craft items that could be sold at local markets. I worked longer hours than I ever had often, starting before dawn and continuing until well after dark. My first major commission in the new workshop came through Jorge, who had been hired to furnish a new restaurant, but had more work than he could handle alone. He subcontracted the bar top and shelving to me, projects that played to my strengths in live edge work and functional design. The night before delivering the finished pieces, I stood in my workshop looking at the bar top, a gorgeous slab of walnut, with natural edges and butterfly keys, reinforcing 2 small cracks. Despite all the chaos and loss of the past months, I had created something beautiful, something that would be used and appreciated for years to come. For the first time, since the confrontation in my parents' garage, I felt a sense of peace. The restaurant installation was a success, leading to referrals for 2 more commercial projects. My residential commissions increased, as well as former clients found my new location and shared their positive experiences with friends. 6 months after losing my original workshop, I was booked 3 months out and had to start turning down smaller projects to focus on higher value commissions. In a move that felt symbolically important, I rehired the same electrician who had helped with my original workshop to upgrade the electrical system in the new garage. As he installed new circuits for my growing collection of tools, he commented on how quickly I had bounced back. "Some people would have given up after what happened to you," he said, connecting the final wires to a new subpanel. "But you have built something even better here." Looking around at my new space, I realized he was right. The layout was more efficient than my original shop. The tools I had purchased, though fewer in number, were selected with years of experience informing my choices. The work displayed on my walls represented my best skills, not just projects accumulated over time. This workshop was not just a replacement for what I had lost. It was an evolution, a space designed with intention and professional purpose. In forcing me to start over, my family had inadvertently pushed me to commit fully to the path I had been hesitantly approaching for years. I was no longer a marketing professional with a woodworking hobby. I was a full-time furniture maker whose marketing skills enhanced my business. The distinction might seem subtle, but it represented a profound shift in identity and purpose that I might have delayed for years without the catalyst of loss. As I locked up the workshop that night, I felt something I had not expected to find, so soon after the betrayal gratitude. Not for the way it had happened certainly, but for where it had led me. In trying to diminish my craft by calling it just a hobby, my father had instead forced me to recognize and claim its true place in my life not as a side interest, but as my calling and livelihood. 8 months after the workshop takeover, I received an unexpected call from Marcus, a contractor I had collaborated with on several projects. He had been hired to do some renovations at a small commercial space and had a strange story to share. "You will never guess whose shop I was working in yesterday," he said. "That guy Troy, your sister's boyfriend. He has got your old equipment set up in this retail space they are trying to convert into a production workshop." My heart tightened at the mention of Troy and my former tools. "How did it look?" Marcus's hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. "Not good, man. That beautiful jointer of yours. He has been running figured maple through it without adjusting the knives properly. The blades are nicked all to hell, and your table saw has burn marks all over the fence like he has been forcing wood through without checking for alignment." I closed my eyes, picturing the tools I had maintained, with such care now being abused by someone who did not understand their proper use. "What about the business? How does that seem to be going?" "That is the other thing," Marcus continued. "While I was there, 2 different customers came in to complain about orders. One guy had a table that was literally falling apart at the joints. Another had a bookcase that was warping badly. Troy was making excuses about wood movement, like it was some mysterious force no one could control, not a basic principle every woodworker needs to account for." After thanking Marcus for the information, I tried to put it out of my mind. Troy's business was no longer my concern. I had my own commissions to focus on, my own reputation to build. But part of me felt a grim satisfaction, knowing that the tools alone did not make the craftsman. 3 weeks later, my sister Lisa called. We had not spoken since the day my workshop was taken, and hearing her voice brought back a flood of complicated emotions. "Michael," she said, her voice tight with stress, "I know you probably do not want to talk to me, but I did not know who else to call." "What is wrong?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "It is the business. It is falling apart, literally. Customers are demanding refunds because the furniture is not holding up. Troy has taken on too many orders without understanding how long things actually take to build properly. We have spent all our startup money on exotic woods that are sitting unused because he does not know how to work with them. And several of the machines are not working right." I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I just felt tired. "What are you calling me for, Lisa? To say you were wrong?" "We need help," she admitted. "Troy would not want me telling you this, but we are in serious trouble. Dad and Mom invested $50,000 in the business. If it fails, they could lose a lot." This was news to me. They invested $50,000 in Troy's business, but called my woodworking a hobby. "I know how it looks," Lisa said quietly. "I did not realize how skilled you were until I saw Troy struggling with things you made look easy. I did not understand that what you did was actually really difficult and took years to learn." Her admission should have felt like a victory, but it was hollow. "I cannot just drop everything to fix Troy's mess, Lisa. I have my own business now, clients, who depend on me." "I understand," she said. "But maybe you could just look at the workshop, give some advice. Dad is really worried. He will not say it, but I can tell." I promised to think about it, but made no commitments. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, running my hands over the smooth maple of a rocking chair I was completing for a client, considering what I owed my family versus what I owed myself. 2 days later, I arrived at my new workshop, to find my father standing awkwardly by the door. He looked older than when I had last seen him, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. For a moment, we just looked at each other, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "Your mother said you might be here this early," he finally said. "Can we talk?" I unlocked the door and let him in, watching as he took in my new space. His eyes moved over the tools, many newer and better than what I had in the original workshop, to the projects in various stages of completion, to the wall displaying photos of my recent installations. "You have done well for yourself," he said, and I heard the surprise in his voice. "No thanks to you," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my words. He nodded, accepting the rebuke. "I deserve that. I made a terrible mistake, Michael. I did not understand what woodworking really meant to you. I thought it was just something you did for fun. Even if it had been just for fun, that would not have given you the right to take my equipment. You are right, he admitted, running a hand over his face. I got caught up in Troy's enthusiasm. He made it sound so promising, like a real business opportunity for Lisa. You know, I have always worried about her finding her way. So you sacrificed my passion for hers. I did, and I was wrong. The words seemed to cost him something to say, my father, who had rarely admitted to being wrong about anything in his life. And now we are paying the price. The business is failing, Michael. Troy has taken orders he cannot fulfill, used materials improperly, and damaged most of the equipment. We invested our retirement savings in this venture, and it is all falling apart. I leaned against my workbench, arms crossed. Lisa called me. She mentioned the investment. $50,000, my father confirmed, plus the cost of leasing the commercial space. We thought we were giving Lisa and Troy a start in a real business. Instead, we have jeopardized our retirement and lost your trust in the process. What exactly are you asking me for, Dad? He met my eyes directly for the first time. We need your help to salvage what we can. Troy has orders for nearly $200,000 worth of furniture that he cannot possibly complete with his current skills. If he fails to deliver, the business will go under, and our investment will be lost. Worse, his reputation, and by extension, ours, will be ruined in this community. You want me to bail out Troy after you gave him my workshop and called my craft a hobby. The irony was almost too much. I know it is a lot to ask, my father said quietly, but I am asking anyway. Not for Troy, but for your mother and me, and yes, for Lisa too. She has finally found something she cares about, even if it came at your expense. I walked to the window, looking out at the early morning light filtering through the trees. The anger I had nursed for months was still there, but alongside it was something else. The recognition that holding on to that anger would shape me in ways I did not want. I will look at the situation, I said finally. I will assess the workshop, the orders, the damage to the equipment, but I am not promising anything beyond that, and if I do help, it will be on my terms. Relief washed over my father's face. That is all I can ask for. Thank you, Michael. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Dad, just so we are clear, woodworking was never just a hobby to me. It was always my calling. I just needed the push to recognize it fully. He nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. Sometimes we fail the people we love by not seeing them clearly. I failed to see you, Michael, and I am sorry for that. After he left, I stood in my workshop, surrounded by the evidence of my skill and dedication, and felt the first tentative steps toward forgiveness. Not for Troy, whose arrogance had catalyzed this whole situation, but for my father and sister, whose greatest crime had perhaps been not understanding the depth of what they were dismissing. The next day, I would go to Troy's workshop and see firsthand what remained of my former tools and what could be salvaged from the business they had built on the foundation of my hobby. But today I would complete the rocking chair for my client, losing myself in the rhythm of the work I loved, the work that had never been just a pastime, but the core of who I was meant to be. The scene that greeted me when I finally visited Troy's workshop was worse than I had imagined. My once pristine equipment was barely recognizable. The jointer knives were damaged beyond repair. The table saw's surface was scratched and burned. Even the dust collection system had been improperly installed, with ductwork kinked and inefficient. More concerning were the stacks of exotic hardwoods stored directly on the concrete floor without proper stickers to allow airflow, many boards already warping from moisture imbalance. Partially completed projects lined the walls most, showing obvious flaws in joinery and finish. Troy's initial reaction to my arrival was predictably defensive. I did not ask for your help, he said, arms crossed over his designer flannel shirt that, unlike mine, showed no signs of sawdust or wear. No, my father and sister did, I replied evenly. From what I can see, they were right to be concerned. Lisa at least seemed genuinely relieved to see me. Thank you for coming, Michael. I know this is awkward. I spent the first hour simply assessing the damage, making notes about what could be salvaged and what needed to be replaced. The financial picture became clearer. As I reviewed their books, they had taken deposits on nearly 40 custom pieces and delivered only 8, all of which had generated complaints or requests for repairs, and spent most of the capital on shop. Set up exotic materials they were not equipped to work with, and an elaborate marketing campaign, complete with professional photo shoots of furniture that Troy had not yet learned to build. "You have 3 options as I see it," I told them when I had completed my assessment. 1. You can close the business now, refund whatever deposits you can sell the equipment and materials to recoup some costs and cut your losses. 2. You can drastically scale back focus on simple projects within Troy's current skill level and slowly build capacity over years as his abilities improve. Or 3. You can accept my help on my terms to salvage the current situation and transition to a more sustainable model. "What terms?" Troy asked suspiciously. "First, I take over all production decisions. What materials to use, what designs are feasible, what timeline is realistic. Second, you both acknowledge to customers that you are bringing in a master woodworker as a partner to ensure quality. Third, I get 30% of the revenue from all current orders I help complete." 30%, Troy protested. "That is highway robbery." "It is actually below market rate for my skills," I countered. "And without me, you will be delivering nothing but refunds and apologies. Your choice." After some grumbling and a private discussion, Troy and Lisa accepted my terms. What followed was 3 months of intensive work. I split my time between my own shop and theirs, bringing some of their smaller pieces to my workshop where I could use my properly functioning equipment. I also began training Troy in the basics he should have learned before attempting to sell custom furniture: how different woods respond to seasonal changes, how to properly prepare stock, how to execute basic joinery that would hold up over time. To my surprise, once his ego was set aside, he proved to be a reasonably capable student, though far from the master craftsman he had presented himself as. Lisa found her own niche in the business, applying her artistic talents to design and client relations areas where she genuinely excelled. She had an eye for proportion and style that complemented my technical skills, and she was adept at translating client wishes into feasible designs. We established a new business model where Troy would handle simpler projects and components while I took on the more complex technical work. Lisa managed client expectations and project timelines, ensuring we only promised what we could realistically deliver. My father, seeing the transformation, began to spend time in the shop as well, not building furniture, but using his business experience to create proper systems for inventory accounting and project management. 6 months after my intervention, we had completed all the backlogged orders with only a few minor delays and no quality complaints. The business had been rebranded as Family Timber Collaborative, acknowledging the contributions of each family member and moving away from Troy's original concept of mass-produced luxury furniture to focus on fewer higher quality, truly custom pieces. My own business continued to thrive alongside this family venture. I maintained my independence, my separate workshop, and my personal client base. The arrangement evolved into something like a partnership of separate but complementary businesses, mine focused on high-end, technically demanding commissions, while Family Timber handled a broader range of projects with me consulting on technical aspects as needed. The most significant change, however, was not in the business structure, but in the family dynamics. My father, who had once dismissed my woodworking as just a hobby, now regularly brought potential clients to my workshop, proudly showing them my latest projects and process. He had developed a genuine appreciation for the craft he had previously undervalued. Lisa and I rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than the competitive dynamic that had characterized our earlier years. She acknowledged the years of expertise I had developed and stopped seeing my success as somehow diminishing her own opportunities. Even Troy, though still prone to grandiose ideas, had gained a humility born of failure and recovery. He learned to value the knowledge I shared rather than seeing it as a threat to his authority. We would never be close friends, but we found a working relationship based on clear boundaries and defined responsibilities. 1 year after the workshop takeover, we gathered for a family dinner to celebrate both businesses' successes. As we sat around the table, My mother raised her glass. To lessons learned, she said. Sometimes the hardest ones are the most valuable. My father nodded, adding, and to seeing clearly what has been in front of us all along. Later that evening, as the dishes were being cleared, my father pulled me aside. I have been thinking about the garage at the house, he said. It is sitting empty now that Troy and Lisa have the commercial space. I was wondering if you might want to use it again, maybe as a second location, or for specialty projects. The offer was clearly his attempt at making amends, at restoring something he had taken from me. But I shook my head. Thank you, but no, I replied. That space was where I learned and grew, but my new workshop is where I became who I was meant to be. Sometimes you need to be pushed out of comfortable spaces to find your true path. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. You have built something remarkable, Michael. Not just beautiful furniture, but a life doing what you love. I am sorry it took me so long to see its value. The important thing is that you see it now, I told him, and that I finally had the courage to claim it fully for myself. In the end, losing my workshop turned out to be the catalyst I needed to transform my hobby into my livelihood and identity. The betrayal and loss forced me to commit completely to my craft in ways I might have hesitated to do otherwise. While I would never have chosen that painful path, I could now appreciate where it had led me. My story is not unique. Many of us have had our passions dismissed or undervalued by those whose approval we seek. The lesson I learned was that true validation comes not from others' recognition, but from the courage to pursue what calls to us regardless of that recognition. Sometimes the very people who fail to see your vision become the unwitting agents of its fullest realization. If my story resonates with you, I would love to hear about your own experiences pursuing your passions despite others' doubts. Have you ever had someone dismiss something you cared deeply about, only to be proven wrong later? How did you find the strength to continue believing in yourself? Share your stories in the comments below, and do not forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this journey with me. Sometimes our greatest triumphs come from our deepest disappointments, and I am grateful to have shared mine with you today. Thank you for listening.